Let's just talk. Let's go in. What do y'all want to get out of this class? I mean, just when you think about it, psych is some people love it, some people hate it. And you can, if you're either camp, I don't care. I just kind of want to know where y'all are. So what do y'all want to know? Let's just talk. Huh?
I want to know about the fun stuff.
And what do you consider the fun stuff?
Not depression and that stuff, but like the manic.
You like the ones that are kind of wild. So you're going to like personality disorders.
Yeah.
And you're going to like mania. And you're going to like schizophrenia. There's some interesting stuff out there. Okay, so those are kind of exciting.
Yeah, they're exciting.
Depressing is kind of not exciting by definition. I mean, it's kind of down. But I will tell you, it's more interesting than you know. Okay, so let me just give you a preview. What else do y'all want to know? Yeah.
I want to be able to know, like, from a clinical standpoint, no matter what specialty we're in, how to kind of, not like handle patients, but how to best treat patients who have additional comorbidities but have a psych, you know what I'm saying? Like, no matter what specialty you're in, like, how to best treat them given their psychiatric condition.
It's an excellent question because, I said at the very beginning, you will have people with cardiac disease, diabetes, blood pressure problems, musculoskeletal problems, and they will also happen to be depressed. Or they will also happen to have an anxiety disorder. Or they will also happen to have a personality disorder, anxiety disorder, maybe they're schizophrenic. Okay, that does have an impact. It's not like a nothing. So I think the first step in, Sarah Beth, really is just understanding who they are and what's going on. That's
right.
Step one, because then you can actually respond to them and appreciate them better for the pathology that is there. And it's so easy for us to judge some of the psychiatric disorder against a norm that is what we see every day. So our behavior is normative, and when a psychiatric patient's there and their behavior is not normative, it is very easy for people to point out stuff, make fun, deride, avoid, treat differently. And there's places where you have to do some things that are kind of different. But I think more than anything is to get over the barrier of what it is. Okay, so that's a really good question because that's going to happen. It's not like 1 in 100,000 people has a psychiatric disorder. It's a lot more than that. Okay, other things. Other things you want to know. What disorder do y'all want to know the most about? Surely there's something.
Multiple personality disorder. Yeah.
You're interested in autism? Okay. That's an interesting disease. What's that now?
You're talking about autism, so I said, let's talk about vaccines.
Okay, well, it will come up. It's going to happen. Okay? What else y'all want to know? Schizophrenia. How many people in here have worked with patients with psychiatric disorders and are well aware? And I know you have, because that's kind of your business.
I worked at a pharmacy. Does that count?
And absolutely it counts. Jessica, what did you see most? Depression? Anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, that's the majority, but I worked with mostly adolescents. I mean, I did see a lot of, higher up, like schizophrenia occasionally, but that's, true schizophrenia is rare in children, so.
It is, because it doesn't usually show up until, get into the late teens, early 20s at the earliest. Okay, so you've seen some things. Who else has worked? There were several hands up. I'm kind of curious about what's in the room. So I know you've worked with it, and did you do cognitive behavioral therapy? Okay, so you've done some things. Who else? Amanda, did you?
So I worked in an Alzheimer's care unit with other issues that were going on.
Yeah.
I got hit once.
Yeah.
It was completely unprovoked, but I don't know, you couldn't really say if it was from a different disorder or Alzheimer's standpoint.
Yeah. Okay, so stuff is going on. Okay. Who else has worked with psychiatric illness? You two have? What did you have?
I worked at just like a clinic that had a psychologist and a psychiatrist. It was kind of like they had escort too.
Okay.
And I would room the mental health patients on Mondays and Fridays.
So you got to interact with a lot of different person types. Did you, Tyler?
I did a rotation at Laureate in Tulsa.
Okay, in Tulsa, yeah.
And then we also had to do another psych rotation at dietetics school, and then I worked with kids with autism and on the spectrum.
Okay. That's interesting. The one who's doing it, she's really good about it. She does a really good presentation. And she's actually working on PhD. I was expecting to see it was done. She's in her final dissertation phase. She's at Oklahoma State University, but she's already licensed counseling social worker, so she's doing more stuff besides that. You would work with them, Stacey?
My experience is more from an academic forensic side. I worked with people who were in the FBI behavioral analysis unit, and I taught classes with them about personality disorders and stuff like that.
Okay, all right. What scares y'all about psychiatric patients? I mean, if y'all can be honest enough, do they bother you? Is it somebody that you want to see, or is it somebody who's going to bother you?
They freak me out, like, they're just so, like, in your face, and
They're pretty
well,
well,
like, that's what they're.
Things you say.
Yeah,
They
it's
can,
like
but
typical
I think that's an honest statement. I think they can be, really pressing on you.
They scare me too. I think because I don't know anything about psych. I've never been around them. So to me, people I would think of more severe. I think of like schizophrenia and bipolar. They're unpredictable because I don't know anything about it.
And so it makes you a little
It makes
anxious.
me nervous. Yeah.
Yeah, and it could. What else? What else bothers you about it? Those are pretty common fears within a class of students. Yeah.
it's just like a sensitive, fragile matter. Like when I was described in the ER, they were like, never close the door to the patient's room whenever you're leaving, just because you never know what could happen.
Yeah, it's true. You don't know what can happen with somebody who's not psychiatric in a room.
True.
You can have malevolent people who set you up. I mean, but this world is not safe in every place, in every way. Okay. Hannah, did you have?
Just the same. It's just like everything kind of plays a role when you like prescribe them medications. Like everything, it's just you've got to know like your specifics. You've got to know what you got to give them. Everything plays a role. So it's sensitive, delicate. It's a delicate patient, I think.
It is. Yeah, I think there's a high liability there too. Just because harm can happen. Okay. Does anybody feel like they would be uncomfortable in a room with the patient by themselves if they were schizophrenic? I mean, seriously, raise your hand if that would make you nervous. I'll tell you, it makes me I would say this, I'm not nervous like I'm non-functional at all, but when I'm in a room with a schizophrenic patient, I have heightened awareness. I am much more on edge. I'm watching everything that's going on because you just never know. I've had patients move on me. I've had patients threaten me. I've had patients tell me they would kill me when I was in a parking lot. I've had a lot of things. I mean, if you hang out with psych patients long enough, there's stuff will happen. And I remember, I'll give you one little story just to tell you what you can expect. Not that it will happen to you, but when I was working over in the VA as a clinical specialist, I had my own clinic. I had patients. I saw people, a lot of people, and I had one patient that was a post-Vietnam era veteran. He was a huge person, probably 6'4", 6'5", probably 300 pounds. I mean, just a hulking, looming physical presence that could hurt anybody. I mean, in a psychiatric patient, if they go berserk on you, they could kill you. I mean, they could hurt you with their hands, because you just don't know what level of restraint they might have in behavior. And this man, I'm sitting in my room. We have panic buttons up under every desk, when you're sitting here in the examining rooms. And he was sitting there between me and the door, which is not an arrangement I wanted to have, but the way the VA built those rooms, they fixed it to where the patient came to the door and you were over here. And it's kind of like, I never look at an exam room thinking I'm going to be over here. I always want my exit is for me first, for a reason. And this man was sitting there between me and the door and didn't like what I told him. I don't know what it was he took exception to, but I wasn't doing anything. There was nothing I can recall that was bad. And he just said, I don't like you. Just kind of looked at me, kind of looking down at me. I don't like you, and I just want you to know something about me. And I said, well, what would you like me to know? He said, I'm a C4 munitions expert. That's bomb making material. And he said, I'm going to blow you up. And just walked out the door just to certainly see me. And I thought, well, shit. I'm going to go home today. I'm going to be dead. And not too long after that episode, I started getting phone calls at my house at night for 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Pick up the phone, hang up. I thought, okay, this is not good. Then one night about 3:30 a.m., we had a two-story house, and our master bedroom was on the second floor. One of the best houses. It was a great house. And we're sitting there, and lights kept coming through the windows because the road came down the hill to our house. So if they were on the hill, the lights would go through the second floor, but then they would end up on the bottom. So the lights were, I thought, who is driving around this neighborhood in the middle of the night? So I looked out the window and saw this car, and it stopped on the hill looking down at the house. It just stopped there, just turned the lights out, and I thought, and then it would just circle around and come back and park and look, and I thought, okay, I don't like this. I called the police, and I said, I want you to come out here and just ask somebody what they're doing in this neighborhood in the middle of the night with their lights on, parking in front of our house. And the police came. By the time they got there, the person had gone on. And then I thought, he said, can you imagine who it could be? And I said, yep, I can imagine who it could be. And I told him who I thought it was. And so I went back to the VA the next day, and I asked him, and I said, how does somebody know where I live? Because when you work in those places, you don't give out your address or your phone number, and nobody does that. You never give out phone numbers to patients or addresses about where people live. And it turned out that this nutcase actually had called up to the VA and asked, and somebody had given it to him. Gave my phone number and gave my address. And so I just told the police who it was, and so it stopped. It never happened anymore after that. So I don't know if the police called him and said, well, just a follow-up phone call, just checking things out. But it stopped after that. So for that reason, or that's one of several reasons, I just have more heightened awareness, because you don't know how they will perceive you or how they receive you. You just don't know. And you don't have a lot of control over it either. This is the way it is. Okay. Was that a good story?
No,
I have so many. I'm just going to drag them up. Okay. Well, thank you for saying that. I just kind of want to get into what we're going to be looking at. Let's look at this, and we'll go through some terminology here just to kind of get things launched. The objectives for this presentation are on D2L. You can look at those. And that will be the way they will be posted separate. I don't have handouts and slides. I've just done detailed slides. I have to always flip the coin. What am I going to do? And actually, I think this works better for our purposes, so I'm just going to go with that. Let's look at history of psychiatry, because it is helpful to understanding what's happening. Go back to the ancient times. And I still think some of this mysticism operates today when it goes to psychiatric illness. Back in the old days, way back when, people thought psychiatric illness was supernatural. There are even people who say demon possession, evil spirits, something has gotten into you because you're not acting normal, so it can't be you. It has to be somebody taking you over. So it's some kind of supernatural. So they used to do things called trepanation, where they would drill a hole in the head. And you've seen, here's the wrong one, wrong beat. So you can see they drilled holes to relieve pressure in the brain and to let the evil spirits get out, because they did localize evil spirits are working in your head, because that's where the talking's coming from, and that's where the thinking must be coming from, so they do that. Okay. In the Middle Ages, what they did, so you go along, evil spirits are always out there as the basis for what's going on. And honestly, the psychiatric patients will tell you they've been possessed, or that evil has gotten into them. I mean, you'll hear these kind of interesting stories too. Back in the Middle Ages, they finally decided, if they didn't kill you off earlier, and people with mental disorders were much more likely to be killed off anyway, just because they were a threat to the community. They started putting them in asylums because there was no really way to treat people. I mean, if you're a paranoid schizophrenic back in the Middle Ages, what are you going to do with that person? You just get them locked away somewhere, because they're going to come hurt you. So they use restraints a lot. They chain people up. They put them in rooms, just get them out of the way. And the first hospital that was ever built was the Bethlehem Royal Hospital, which we also know as Bedlam. And in this state, if you're a Sooner, you've been here, and Sooner broadly, all Oklahoma, did you know about the Bedlam robbery? Well, it goes back to the same thing. It's just mass chaos, hysteria, craziness. It's just a scene. Okay, so that's Bedlam. Okay, look at this picture. You see all these little people in here, they're just all loose in a room. Who knows what they're doing? This one's, what they're doing with their hands. This one's maybe says, I've got something on my head, or some, maybe a tactile hallucination, something's touching me. I mean, this is just kind of chaotic, kind of crazy. Would that not make you unnerved to be in that room? And I see these two ladies like, what are y'all doing? Run! Whatever y'all have, y'all need to get out of there. Okay. Okay, Bedlam, you've seen it. Okay. Here's some other stuff. See what they do to restrain people? They put them in these little cages. Okay, how do you think that person can, I mean, that's terrible. I mean, nowadays we consider that barbaric, but back then it was not barbaric. Look at this one. You can't move. And look at this person, restrained, tied down, and they have this thing on because a lot of times it's about photophobia and light and weird sensations, so they just box them up. I just think this, all of it's kind of insane. Okay, so somewhere things begin to change. You go back to the Enlightenment, the attitudes about mentally ill people begin to change, and they begin to believe that you're treating people wrong when you lock them up and chain them up and box them up like that. So they decide there must be a better way to go. In 1758, a man named William Batty actually wrote a thing called Treatise on Madness, and he made the statement that mental illness was a dysfunction of the material brain, that's like the brain itself, the substance of the brain, and the body rather than internal workings of the mind. He might have been on to something earlier. It's like there's got to be something wrong in that brain. There's something wrong in that person's body that makes them behave like this as opposed to the way their brain should be working. It's actually probably both. You know, the physical and the thinking abilities are integrally linked, as you know from doing neurology. Brain lesions can change the way a person thinks and acts. Okay? In the United States, this name is a big name in psychiatry, Doretha Lynn Dix. She was the one responsible for opening up the first asylum in New York, and it was her work. So there's a lot of Doretha Dix foundations. There's all kinds of things named after her in the state of New York and in mental health in general. Okay. We also have Sigmund Freud, 1800s. Everybody knows about Dr. Freud. He made psychoanalysis popular, and it's still around, but it may not be as influential as it was once. Like the late 1800s, early 1900s on up, that was kind of the thing to do with psychoanalysis. And he did several different methods. You know, talked about dream interpretation. That's actually still out there. Free association, you know, you show people a Rorschach spot, what do you see, and just pictures and what first comes to mind. And then also transference, where somebody might see a person that looks like somebody who was mean to them when they were a baby, and then they act that they put it out on that person, or maybe they're in love with somebody because it looks like somebody that they were in love with at one point. And then in the world of mental health and taking care of people, you have to watch out for countertransference, which is the therapist actually then relates back to the amorous moves of the patient. So you have to kind of watch out about what's going on when you're in a room with the patient. And I will tell you, it's easier to be manipulated and maneuvered by a person with a psychiatric disorder than you would think. You're trying to help somebody take care of them, so you're in your helping mode, and they're kind of actually in a receiving mode, but in kind of a very subtle, manipulative way, and before you know it, you've kind of walked in a little bit too far for where they need to be, and then you have to walk back out and they hate you. So you have to, Jessica's shaking her head, it's all this thing about boundaries, like I'm here functioning as a provider, and you're here coming as a patient for help, and somewhere it gets lost. Help, therapy, how is it received, and what's the relationship? So it happens to folks. I've known friends, I know somebody specifically who was a therapist, a counselor, who actually ended up having an affair with the patient. And so, I mean, this happens this is not like one time out of a million. Very common for the therapist to have emotional needs that seem to be met by the patient as emotional needs, and before you know it, you've got something going on. Well, of course, that's highly unprofessional, and you lose license for stuff like that. So be careful about it. But Freud introduced all of those things to us. Then it gets close to what we're used to. In the 20s and 40s, they came up with biological psychiatry and psychopharmacology, where they began to figure out that chemicals in the brain might have something to do with the way you think and act. So they call that biological psychiatry. And the first neurotransmitter discovered was acetylcholine, that's autolowy. Okay, so you've got that. And then almost incidentally, they discovered that lithium actually stabilizes mood. It wasn't like they were, oh, we're going to try lithium, we're going to stabilize mood. It just just discovered. Okay, so they began to put together that chemicals do things in the brain, cause problems in the brain, chemical modifiers can change things in the brain, and so they kind of kept working that angle. 1952, they came up with Thorazine, chlorpromazine, major tranquilizer. Have y'all had that one yet? Thorazine, it's not, you rarely see it used anymore. It will knock a horse out. It is so sedating. Pretty much in the back of the days, if somebody's acting out, they wanted to give them Thorazine big doses because they're on the floor. Just, it will sleep for a long time. 1970s, the preferred treatment for psychiatric disorders changed. It moved to psychotherapy and pharmacologic treatments with more and more deinstitutionalization of patients. Now, y'all have grown up in a different age. When I grew up, institutionalization was still there. This was in the 60s. I was born in 57, so in the 60s, early 70s, it was not uncommon for people to go away to a facility. And it was kind of a mark of shame in the family. You didn't want you didn't want people to know that somebody in your family was institutionalized at whatever institution. Like in Oklahoma, Griffin Memorial is a place, if you say, well, they had to go to Griffin Memorial, then you kind of know something wrong happened. In Alabama, in Tuscaloosa, the place was called Bryce's Hospital. I had an aunt that actually worked up there as a nurse one time, and she told us all these stories. But I'll give you one story about Bryce. Bryce in Alabama it adjoins the University of Alabama campus. I mean, it's there. In fact, it's now been closed and moved out, and so that all that territory has now been embraced by the university. So I was a student up there. My dad is a huge Auburn fan, hates Alabama, just like the OU, OSU thing, just kind of hated, don't want you to go up there. And I wanted to go up there, so I went. And I told him one day I was walking to the library, and this odd-looking person was kind of walking up behind me and kept getting closer and closer, and I thought, you don't look right. I was a little stupid I was a 17-year-old freshman, naive, just didn't know anything about anything. And I saw these two people in white coats closing in faster than this person was closing in on me, and they eventually nabbed him. And it was actually a patient from Bryce's who had gotten out and was on the university campus. So, of course, my dad, with his, easy jokes about that used to be the big joke, don't know where Bryce's ends and Alabama starts. So I went back for him. He said, I told you that school wasn't worth anything. And I said, I'm not telling you anything more about my experiences at college. But it was true. But it's now closed, and so they are who they are. Okay. Let's look at prevalence of mental illness so you get an appreciation of how common it actually is. There's an agency that puts together stats. It's called the SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They do this as a part of DHHS. They do a national survey annually. They do 70,000 people selected at random who are 12 years age and older to figure out what is the prevalence of certain types of mental illness within the society. And they have definitions for any mental illness and serious mental illness. Now, any mental illness is defined as a mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder, excluding developmental. And y'all have had some of those, like intellectual disabilities, motor disorders, learning disabilities, ADHD, autism spectrum. Those are all considered neurobiological problems. And it's not substance use disorder like alcohol or inhalant or other drugs of use. Diagnosable within the past year and of sufficient duration to meet diagnostic criteria. So any mental, behavioral, or emotional disorder, and they got statistics here. So look at what you have. You have overall 17.9% of people have it. So that's almost 1 in 5 people has something that could be classified as a mental disorder. Okay? Females a little bit more than males. Age groups, the younger, less older. In some respects, this number falls down as you get older because people aren't living longer. The mental people with mental disorders don't live the same lifespan, and so they might be out of the stats. And then you look at race, ethnicity, and you see that Hispanic patients, African American patients are less than Caucasian patients. Asian patients, even less than that. So you can see how it is. I think it's interesting. Asian, American Indian, and Alaska Natives have the highest incidence as a single ethnic group. And I think if you work with the tribes, then you will know that that is one of the problems is mental disorders, you know, depression, anxiety, other types of problems, schizophrenia. Okay, now let's look at how many are serious. So that's a lot of people, 17.9%, that's almost 1 in 5 people has something that can be classified as a disorder. Look at serious mental illness is a mental, behavioral, emotional disorder excluding the developmental and substance use disorders diagnosed within the past year and of sufficient duration to meet diagnostic criteria within the 5th edition of the DSM-5. And we'll look at that here in a second. It has the definition to be serious is it has to result in serious functional impairment which substantially interferes with or limits one or more major life activities. Can't go to work, can't keep your children, can't take care of yourself, something's going on. Now look at this. Still is pretty high. 4% of the population has a serious mental illness. That means 1 in 25 people that you come across has a serious mental disorder. That's a lot of people. If you're a healthcare provider, there's a lot of people that you'll see as patients. It's not just one. It's a good number. Female, more than male, that holds. The age differential holds. And the racial, ethnic disparities hold. It's just really high in Native Americans. Okay. Service use. How much resources consumed? This is a service or treatment of serious mental disorder. Well, among the population, 58.7% actually have services provided, which means that 40-something% don't. The big figure here is how many people with a serious mental disorder don't have treatment. Okay, you kind of know that from just common sense. A lot of people don't get treatment or they don't stay in treatment. And you see the usage is higher the older a person lives. That means they're functional enough to keep living and be alive and to probably finally access resources or have somebody advocate for them. And it's lower in the younger group. And then you look at where's most of the care. Prescription is about half the people, outpatient about 40%, inpatient 7.5%. So the bottom line, a lot of people are getting services, but a lot of people are not. And in this state, you know, there's always a funding crisis. Nobody wants to fund mental health. Well, it is still that way. And it still remains that way in the state. So we don't want to spend money on something that already is undertreated in the first place. And I don't know if that will probably change. It's a group that can't advocate for itself so much. The people who have it really are not able to advocate as strongly as other groups. And I think that's part of it, so others have to advocate for them. Service use, women maybe a little bit more than men, older a little bit more than younger. Now this is an interesting thing to look at here. This is diseases and disorders contributing to disability-adjusted life years. Have you ever heard that figure before? Okay, you know, it's just, what is your life if you didn't have the disability? How you'll live to be 80. Okay, what is your life if you have this disability? You live to be 70. 10 years is the age-adjusted disability because it's taken that many years off your life. Well, they rank disorders by how much they take years off your life. The top 10 leading disorders in neuropsychiatric order disorders combined is 18.7%. So most of the reduced lifespan and productivity and functionality goes in neuropsychiatric disorders. Okay? Number 2, cardiovascular circulatory. Number 3, cancer. So we pay a lot of attention to heart disease and a lot of attention to cancer, but probably not as much to neuropsychiatric disorders, but they actually are consuming a lot of life and a lot of ability, you know, in the world. I'm not trying to be a commercial, I'm just saying, you have to look, I want you to understand the bigger ballgame. Okay, any questions about just where stuff came from? Okay, get up and move. 10 minutes, do anything you want to. Dance, run, jump, leap.